I'm going to talk a little bit about a particular physical problem that many guitarists have had, and it's a pretty serious one. It stops careers and has done that with several guitarists whom I'm not going to list, but you've heard of some of them. It happens also to lutenists. It has happened also to pianists. The most well-known example of this is Robert Schumann, who apparently had a sort of a paralysis of his ring finger, or A finger for guitarists, and figured out all sorts of sneaky tricks of trying to figure out how to get the other fingers to work when that one didn't, and had big problems with it. There have been other more recent examples of pianists with this problem, and as I said, quite a lot of guitarists. And most guitarists, when their A finger stops working so well, then they go to their teacher and say, what can I do? And the teacher says, oh, you're a lazy bum, you're not practicing hard enough, you've got to practice harder. And so then they do, and then that makes it worse and worse and worse until finally they can't really play anything, or they end up trying to tie their finger in some way to keep it out of the way so that then they can use the other fingers. And it's a very sad situation, and as I said, people have lost careers about this. What is going on is that your tip joints of your right hand are not very independent, and the ones of the M and the A and the little finger are absolutely not independent. As you've certainly noticed, you can wiggle your fingers from the bass joint here very easily. That works fine. Even doing these, that works pretty well. You know, this is not super independent, but you can do it. But people who can actually bend one, the tip joint at all, independently, are extremely scarce, because these three tip joints are really run by one muscle that's back here. Who knows why, but anyway, it's back there. And herein lies the problem. Because for instance, if you curl your fingers into a claw, and then pull on your A finger, for instance, then try to stretch out the little finger and the M finger, you can't do it. You can do one at a time. You can do one, but not the other. But you can't do them both. You just can't. It's not physically possible. So here's the problem. If you are a guitarist who holds your wrist rather close to the top of the guitar, which a lot of people do, then you can't really pluck using this joint, which is independent. You have to start kind of pulling and using the tip joints maybe sometimes, and you end up making a not very good sound also. But anyway, if you're trying to, for instance, alternate between your M and your A finger using those tip joints because your hand is down too far for you to be able to do anything else, then you have a problem. Because here's what goes on. If you pull on, for instance, the tip joint of the A finger, and you pull pretty strenuously, all three fingers want to do that, and they all try. And the only way that you prevent all three of them from plucking, which of course since you just want one to pluck you have to do, is you have tendons on the backs of your fingers that go back to here, have an attachment back here at your elbow, and you have to pull really hard on those two fingers to keep them from going along with the A finger. And then if for instance you're alternating A and M, when you go and try to pluck with your M finger, then the same thing happens. You have to then try hard to pull on the tendons on these two fingers, on the A and the little finger, to keep them from going along with the M. And here's the catch with that. If you're doing that a lot and doing it pretty strenuously and trying to go fast, you're relying on these tendons back here, which are not particularly strong. They're not designed to do that kind of work, and they start to get really worn out and tired, and they don't do it anymore. If you've ever eaten a chicken wing, for instance, you know that there's lots of meat on the inside and not a whole lot on the outside. So there's not really strong stuff going on this way. As one friend of mine said, we're good at acquiring things. We're good at pulling things into ourselves. We're not so good at giving them away. So anyway, so that means that this attachment back here is stressed out, and the tendons here that aren't used to doing all that much work are really being overused. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, say, running down maybe, I don't know, 10 flights of stairs in a hurry. You get to the bottom and your calf muscles go all wiggly on you and they go, and they just don't you have to kind of recuperate a little bit before you can use them again. They go sort of spastic. That's what happens, and that's one of the manifestations, and I've seen this in quite a few different people, that they're trying to play with these two tip joints pulling, and what happens is the tendon that's working to keep this one from plucking when the M finger's plucking just says, hey, I give up. I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. And so what happens with the finger is it gets all kind of do, and it pulls right into here, and then it won't come out. And then the person says, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And they try to tie it up, or they try to do some sort of exercise, or they do all sorts of crazy things to try to get this finger to stay up, because once it's in, then these fingers don't work very well either. So this is a syndrome, as I say, I've seen it in probably maybe 20 or more people. I've heard of it in some others. It has stopped people's careers. And the main thing to keep in mind is you have to have your wrist out far enough that these knuckles, the ones nearest the palm of your hand, are where you're doing your movement from. You could curve your fingers all you like, but you shouldn't be pulling with those tip joints. In other words, you can keep your tip joints, if they're all curved to the same degree, then you're moving them all to the same degree. They're all just working the same way. One of them is not working really hard, actually yanking the string up, while the other one isn't doing anything. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind. Have your wrist out far enough, have this part of your hand out far enough that your fingers can pluck the strings and then escape underneath, and that they don't need to pull and yank up, which doesn't make a good sound either. So if you're more interested in making a good sound and all that kind of thing, then maybe watch my Presti Technique right hand thing. But this syndrome happens a lot, and particularly it's with people who have their wrist really low, and usually playing on the left-hand side of the nail, and they're plucking up, pulling up. This is something you do not do. It's dangerous, and if you do it with great dedication and forcefulness for any period of time, you'll probably damage your hand. And if you really damage your hand badly, then you're kind of out of the picture, which has happened to more guitarists than you'd think, and a lot of Baroque flutenists too, because they have a really tricky job, because they've got so many strings, 29 single strings, that they've got to reach way back here, which means they can't have the wrist up so far, because their thumb wouldn't reach otherwise, and so they're in a bad position that way. So be careful, and if you get this, don't just keep on doing what you're doing, but rethink your right hand technique. It's very important.